I was at a dinner party recently, and the conversation turned to the upcoming 2026 elections. There was this young woman there, highly educated, sharp, working in tech, who was speaking with an almost religious fervor about the necessity of expanded state subsidies. To her, the government wasn't just a provider of services, it was a lifeline, a universal safety net that she felt was the only thing standing between her generation and total precarity. Her face lit up when she talked about the moral imperative of institutional support. But then the mood shifted. A guy across the table, a freelance contractor about the same age, let out a dry, cynical laugh. He didn't argue with her data or her morality. He just leaned back and said, "Why would I vote to fund a system that treats my ambition like a pathology?" He described his life as a series of non-cooperation maneuvers, opting out of traditional career ladders, staying single, and moving his savings into decentralized assets. He wasn't angry, he was detached, like he was watching a building burn from a safe distance. The look they exchanged wasn't just a political disagreement, it was a total breakdown in communication. It was as if they were two different species inhabiting the same room, but operating on entirely different biological survival codes. She saw the state as the ultimate beta provider that made individual men obsolete, while he saw the state as a predatory machine and was simply lying flat to avoid being consumed by it. That instantaneous friction, the female drive for institutional provisioning versus the male biological strike against a rigged social contract, isn't just a gender gap in the polls, it's a civilizational circuit breaker. We aren't just looking at a political divide in 2026, we are witnessing the biological endgame of the Z generation, where the very foundations of how we bond, build, and provide are being rewritten in real time.
That's an incredible snapshot. It's a profound moment of dislocation, isn't it?
It really is. It felt like watching a plate fall in slow motion. You could see the crack forming between them.
And what you saw at that table, that wasn't a policy debate. Not really. It was, like you said, the surface level symptom of a much, much deeper biological divergence.
Exactly. And that's our mission for this deep dive, right?
Yeah.
We're going to peel back the layers. Ignore the noise of the pundits and the polling data for a moment.
Yes, and instead look at the machinery underneath that interaction. We need to understand why these two survival strategies, which should be complementary, have somehow become mutually exclusive.
It's not about left versus right anymore. It feels like something more fundamental is breaking.
It is. It's about the strategies human beings are now adopting to survive in a,
Right.
well, in a very strange environment, a high density, high welfare, totally digital environment.
So, to get to the bottom of it, we have to pull from a few different fields. We're going to be synthesizing ethology, so animal behavior with behavioral economics, and even historical cycle theory.
We're looking for the root cause of that silence, that gap between the man and the woman at your dinner party.
And to find that root, we have to start in the very strange place. Not with people, but with mice.
We have to, because that root cause begins with a behavior we've seen before, not in humans, but in the laboratory. It's unavoidable. We have to start by analyzing the beautiful ones phenomenon from John Calhoun's behavioral sink experiment.
Right.
It serves as a predictive model, really, for what we're seeing now, the 2026 rise of these non-reproductive, self-isolating Z generation males in these high welfare atomized Western societies.
So you're saying there's a direct line from this lab experiment to what's happening today?
I'm saying it links this specific behavioral anomaly directly to the collapse of the incentive structures for what you could call male provisioning. It's a perfect parallel.
Okay, so let's set the stage.
Oh.
This takes us back to the National Institute of Mental Health. We're in the late 1960s, early 70s. An ethologist named John B. Calhoun.
That's right. And he constructed what he called Universe 25. It's often described as a mouse utopia, but I think that word utopia is maybe a bit misleading. The details of the construction are absolutely vital to understanding the outcome.
It wasn't just a nice cage.
Not at all. It was a paradise designed specifically to eliminate the struggle for existence. That was the whole point.
Okay, so what did that look like?
Precisely. It was a 9-foot square metal pen. Inside, you had unlimited food from these hoppers, unlimited clean water, perfect climate control. The temperature was always ideal.
So no winter, no drought.
None. And crucially, Calhoun eliminated all predators. He eliminated disease. He created a world where no mouse ever had to shiver or starve or flee for its life.
He took away all the external pressures.
He removed the fundamental stressors that drive evolution and, day-to-day behavior, scarcity and danger. They were just artificially deleted from the equation.
And he starts with how many?
Yeah.
A handful of mice.
He started with just 8, 4 breeding pairs. He chose the healthiest, best specimens from the NIMH stock, the perfect colonist for his perfect world.
And at first, it worked.
Oh, it works spectacularly. Initially, it was just an explosion of life. They called this phase the strive period. The population, I mean, it doubled every 55 days like clockwork. They filled the nesting boxes. They thrived. It looked like the perfect, the perfect society.
But then something changed.
Then the population density hit a critical threshold. And this is where we have to get really specific about what Calhoun called the behavioral sink.
Because it's not what people think it is. It's not about overcrowding.
Exactly. That's the key misunderstanding. It wasn't that they ran out of physical space. The pen could have held thousands more mice without a problem. It was that they ran out of social space.
What's the difference?
The sheer number of social interactions per day became unmanageable. Think about it. In a wild environment, if a mouse is stressed by a dominant male, it has an option. It can run away. It can find a new territory.
But in Universe 25, there was nowhere to run.
There was nowhere to run. They were trapped in a web of constant, unavoidable social friction. Every mouse they met was a stranger. There were too many faces, too many scents, too many challenges. The social roles, mother, father, dominant, male, provider, they just broke down because there were no meaningful roles left to fill.
The system was overloaded.
The entire social operating system just crashed.
Yeah.
And the social fabric, it didn't just fray, it dissolved completely. You saw these pockets of hyperaggression in some mice, but the group that parallels our current situation most closely, that's the group Calhoun himself named the beautiful ones.
Right. Let's focus on them. Who were they?
The beautiful ones were a subgroup of males who simply stopped playing the game. As the chaos in the central pens grew, I mean, you had violence, rape, maternal abandonment, cannibalism. These males physically retreated to the upper nesting boxes.
They just opted out.
They opted out of everything. They withdrew entirely from violence, which was unheard of. They withdrew from courtship. They made absolutely no attempt to mate with the females. They showed no interest.
So what did they do all day?
They spent their entire waking lives on 3 activities: eating, drinking, and sleeping. And a 4th one, grooming. They groomed themselves constantly.
And that's where the name comes from.
Exactly. Calhoun noted that because they didn't fight and they didn't have sex, they had no scars. Their fur was pristine, sleek, unblemished. They were physically perfect specimens. Beautiful to look at.
But inside?
But inside, they were, in Calhoun's words, socially autistic. They had lost the capacity to process complex social signals. They couldn't court, they couldn't defend territory, they couldn't even really interact properly with other mice. They were just these beautiful, empty shells.
They were biological machines just consuming resources.
Perfect description. They were the ultimate consumers, contributing nothing to the colony's structure or its future. They lived in this perfect bubble of safety and abundance, yet they were the ultimate harbingers of extinction.
Which brings us to Calhoun's most chilling concept, I think. This idea of death squared. It's a terrifying phrase.
It is, because he argued that a society doesn't just die once, it dies twice.
Okay, what does that mean?
The first death, he said, is the death of the spirit. This is the cessation of complex social behaviors. It's the loss of purpose, the refusal to engage in the struggle of life, the abandonment of roles like mother or father.
So the beautiful ones, they were already dead.
They had experienced the first death. They were physically alive, their hearts were beating, but they were no longer mice in any meaningful sociological sense. Their spirit was gone.
And the second death?
The second death is the inevitable physical extinction of the body that follows. Once the spirit dies, once the drive to bond and protect and reproduce is extinguished, the body eventually follows. The colony can't sustain itself.
And that's exactly what happened.
To the letter, Universe 25 went extinct, down to the very last mouse, despite having enough food and water to last forever. They didn't starve, they just forgot how to be mice.
The parallel to the modern phenomenon of the hikikomori in Japan and just the general withdrawal of young men in 2026, it's impossible to ignore. It's uncanny.
It is. We see millions of young men retreating into single rooms, withdrawing from the workforce, withdrawing from dating, just checking out.
Now, the obvious critique, and we should address it, is always rats aren't people.
Right. Of course. And that's a fair point on the surface. Skeptics say rats rely heavily on pheromones, and when the pheromones get too intense in a crowded space, their brains basically short-circuit. Humans have culture, we have reason, we have a prefrontal cortex. But what if we've invented a human substitute for pheromones? What if we've created a different kind of overload?
And that's where the quiet collapse theory comes in. The idea that digital saturation, social media, is our version of that pheromonal overload.
Exactly. The theory posits that our constant digital connectivity creates a conceptual space that perfectly mimics the social density of Universe 25.
It's not physical bodies crammed together, it's minds.
It's minds, it's social signals. We are bombarded, not with sense, but with likes, comments, rage baits, status updates, DMs, thousands of times a day. We are living in a digital behavioral sink.
And our brains can't handle it.
Our primitive brains can't really distinguish between a threat on Twitter and a physical threat in the room. The cortisol spike is the same. The social anxiety is the same. The beautiful ones of 2026 are those who have become so overwhelmed by this digital density that they've done the only logical thing.
Retreat.
They've opted for the safety of the screen. The screen is the new upper nesting box. It's a space devoid of all physical friction, but it's full of easy dopamine.
And this connects to another key idea, the loss of what Warren Farrell calls heroic intelligence.
Yes, this is crucial for understanding the male side of this equation. Farrell's work argues that for all of human history, male identity, male value has been constructed around the role of the protector and provider.
Heroic intelligence is that specific skill set.
It's the ability to perceive danger and organize a defense. It's the drive to go out into the chaos of the world, secure resources, and bring them back to the safety of the family, the tribe. It's about being disposable for the good of the group.
But what happens when that role vanishes?
What happens in a human universe 25? In a modern welfare state, the danger is theoretically removed. The state provides the food through subsidies. The police provide the safety. The military protects the borders.
So the role of the individual male protector is outsourced to the institution.
It's outsourced, and the role of the provider is outsourced to the subsidy, to technology, to the global supply chain.
So the male instinct doesn't just go away.
It malfunctions. It has nowhere to go. It's like if you take a border collie that's been bred for generations to herd sheep and you lock it in a small apartment, what does it do?
It goes crazy.
It starts hurting the furniture. It chews the drywall. It's not a bad dog. It's a perfectly good dog that is catastrophically misaligned with its environment.
So when you take a human male, evolved for risk and struggle,
and you place him in a risk-free, high-density environment where his protection is unneeded and his provisioning is optional, what does he do? He turns into a beautiful one. He grooms his avatar. He consumes content. He reclines.
it's not a dramatic crash. You called it a recline. I like that. It's a slow, comfortable slide into obsolescence.
That's what makes it so insidious. It's not a crisis that makes you scream. It's a crisis that makes you comfortable.
But we have to look closer at the man from the dinner party. Because he wasn't just a confused animal reacting to stimuli like a mouse. He was articulate. He had a rationale. He'd thought this through.
He had. And this is where we have to shift gears. We must move from ethology, from animal behavior, to economics. Because his decision wasn't just instinct, it was a calculation.
So we're investigating the biological economics of what's being called the male right turn. The idea that this isn't just a tantrum, it's a rational risk management strategy.
Exactly. We're seeing young men, consciously or not, calculate a negative risk-reward ratio for provisioning and commitment, specifically within legal and social frameworks that they perceive as hostile.
Let's make this concrete. The outline mentions an Arthur, an architect in London. He's our case study here.
Right. Arthur is our avatar for the rational dropout. He's not a hikikomori living in his parents' basement. He's successful. He's working. But he is deliberately, methodically deleveraging from the system.
What does that mean, deleveraging?
It means he's reducing his exposure to risk. He sold his car to avoid debt and insurance costs. He rents a room in a shared house instead of taking on a mortgage. He avoids long-term contracts. And most explicitly, he avoids marriage and fatherhood.
He sees them as a liability.
He calls it actuarial risk management. It's a chillingly detached phrase. He is looking at his life, his relationships, his future through the same lens an insurance company would use to calculate a premium.
And this starts with the biology of risk itself, doesn't it? There's a hormonal component here.
There is. We have data, for instance, from the Determinants of Economic Preferences study that links testosterone levels directly to financial risk-taking. It's not a cultural construct, it's biological.
So higher testosterone correlates with a greater willingness to take risks.
The correlation is undeniable. High T levels, even physical markers of facial masculinity, they all correlate with a higher willingness to take financial risks. And evolutionarily, this makes perfect sense.
Why?
For a male in the ancestral environment, resources were the gateway to reproduction. If you didn't take the risk to hunt the mammoth or raid the neighboring tribe for territory, you didn't get the status. And if you didn't have status, you didn't get the mate. It was that simple.
So money today is just.
Money is just the modern proxy for fitness. It's a quantifiable measure of your ability to provide.
Men, then, are the biological risk engine of the economy. They are wired to bet their time, their energy, their resources to gain more. But Arthur has stopped betting.
He stopped betting because he's looked at the table, he's looked at the dealer, and he has come to the conclusion that the casino is rigged.
The drive is still there, the testosterone.
The biological drive to acquire is still firing, but he looks at the social contract of 2026 and sees a profoundly bad trade.
This is where we have to bring in some concepts that are, well, they're controversial, but they're central to this line of thinking. Ideas from the manosphere like sexual market value or SMV and hypergamy.
We have to, because they form the basis of Arthur's calculation. He looks at the modern legal framework, divorce courts, alimony laws, the potential loss of access to his own children, and he sees what that world calls institutional misandry.
A system that's biased against men.
From his perspective, it's a system where he takes on 100% of the financial and legal risk for what is, statistically, a 50% chance of failure. And in the event of that failure, he risks losing everything: his assets, his home, his kids.
A catastrophic loss.
It's total ruin. So that's the risk side of the equation. Then he looks at the reward side and the mating market itself, and that's where hypergamy comes in.
Which is the female biological instinct to marry up.
To mate up. Yes, to find the best possible provider and protector. It's a deeply ingrained evolutionary strategy. In a small village of 100 people, Arthur, as the architect, might be the best option. He has high value.
But we don't live in villages anymore.
We live on the internet. And in the digital age, what's called the digital mirror effect kicks in. The woman he's interested in isn't just comparing him to the other guys in London.
She's comparing him to the top 10 or maybe top 1% of men she sees on her screen every single day. The athletes, the entrepreneurs, the celebrities.
The standard for what constitutes the best has been artificially and exponentially inflated by digital media. So Arthur isn't competing locally, he's competing globally. And he realizes that to even be visible to the women he desires, he needs to be in the absolute top percentile of status and wealth.
That's a huge mountain to climb.
It's an almost impossible mountain. And the effort required to climb it, combined with the catastrophic legal risks of being stripped of all those assets if the relationship fails, creates what he would call a negative expected value.
The bad investment.
It's a terrible investment. The rational economic move is to refuse to play.
So he strikes.
It's a biological strike. This is what lying flat in China or going galt in the West is all about. It's a quiet, passive refusal to provide labor, resources, and protection to a system that you perceive as devaluing you.
Which explains the detachment of the man at the dinner party. He wasn't angry, he was.
He was making a business decision. He was a contractor looking at a bad contract. He basically said, I will not invest my life's energy into a volatility I cannot control.
And for those who don't go on a full strike, we also see alternative strategies emerging, like this idea of spinning plates.
Yes, this is the alternative to the full withdrawal. Instead of making one high-risk, high-investment met marriage, the man maintains multiple low-risk, short-term, non-exclusive connections.
Why? What's the logic there?
It's about creating an artificial sense of abundance. It's a psychological hedge against the scarcity and brutality of the modern dating market. It's a way to avoid over-investing in any single outcome.
It's portfolio diversification for relationships.
A perfect analogy.
Yeah.
But the social consequence is catastrophic because it means no deep investment is ever being made. No families are being started. The whole structure becomes hollowed out.
And then there's the tragedy of the timeline divergence. This is really where the friction becomes obvious. The concept of the wall versus the male peak.
This is perhaps the cruelest part of the math for both sexes. Generally speaking, women hit their peak sexual market value in terms of physical beauty and fertility in their early 20s.
And men.
Men, if they are successful in the struggle for resources and status, tend to peak much later. Their 30s, their 40s, even their 50s. So look at Arthur. He's in his mid-20s. He's still building. He's invisible to the women he desires.
He's struggling. And he sees his female peers, who are at their peak, getting attention from older, wealthier, higher status men.
Exactly. So what does he do? He puts his head down, he grinds, he suffers, he builds his value brick by painful brick. And then 10 or 15 years later, he's 35 or 40. He has the resources. He has the status.
And suddenly he's the desirable one.
Suddenly he is. And the women who ignored him completely in their 20s are now looking for stability. They're looking to consolidate. They're looking for a provider to start a family with.
But Arthur has a long memory.
And he's been educated by the internet. The modern male, armed with this data, this red pill awareness as it's called, often refuses to be the consolidation prize. He refuses to be the retirement plan, the safe bet for a woman who spent her peak years with other men.
And that's the friction. That's the breakdown.
That's the breakdown. The women are looking for a reliable provider right at the historical moment when the men have decided that providing is a sucker's game. Their timelines are completely out of sync.
Which brings us, inevitably, to the other side of that schism. If the Arthurs of the world are on strike, where do the women go for that security they are biologically wired to seek?
They go to the state. They go to Elena.
Elena's the woman from the dinner party. She's the policy researcher in Berlin.
And this is where we examine how this polarization, this female state dependency versus male biological non-cooperation, precisely aligns with Sir John Glubb's Age of Decadence stage in his book, The Fate of Empires.
You're saying this isn't a new phenomenon. It's a predictable historical pattern.
It's the terminal phase of a civilization defined by excessive individualism and, in our case, the collapse of what you could call the sexual resource Gini coefficient.
So Elena, she sees the state not as a necessary evil or a bureaucracy, but as a hyper-agent.
A hyper-agent. And we have to analyze this through the lens of the state as beta provider. This goes back to Robert Schreiber's parental investment theory.
Explain that.
It's simple, really. Females in any species have a massive biological investment in reproduction. Pregnancy, birth, nursing, rearing the young. It's incredibly costly in terms of time, energy, and risk.
So they need security.
They don't just prefer it. It is a non-negotiable survival requirement. They are biologically wired to seek out resource security to ensure their offspring survive.
And for thousands of years, that security came from an individual man. The husband, the provider.
Correct. But if the husbands are becoming beautiful ones, socially inert and checked out, or if they're like Arthur actively hostile to the provider contract, then that security is gone. There's a vacuum.
And a vacuum must be filled.
And the only entity large enough and powerful enough to fill that vacuum in the modern world is the state.
So the state becomes the surrogate husband.
It becomes the ultimate beta provider. The state provides the housing subsidy, the health care, the child care, the universal basic income, the food stamps. The state is the only entity that can underwrite the immense biological cost of being a woman in a society where individual men have abandoned the provider role en masse.
That explains the religious fervor you described in the woman at the dinner party.
It explains everything. When she argues for more subsidies, she isn't just arguing for an economic policy. She is arguing for her own survival strategy. She is defending her mate. It just happens that her mate is the government.
And you're saying this is exactly what Sir John Glubb predicted in his analysis of empires.
It's uncanny. He analyzed 3,000 years of history, from the Assyrians to the British. He found they all last about 250 years, about 10 generations, and they all follow the same life cycle, ending in what he called the Age of Decadence.
And we are living in the textbook definition of that age. Glubb identified very specific symptoms, didn't he?
He did. First and foremost, a massive welfare state and the shift from service to selfishness. In the early stages of an empire, in the age of pioneers, men sacrifice and die for the state. In the end stage, the age of decadence, the state is viewed as a trough to be eaten from. It becomes a mechanism for individual entitlement, not collective duty.
He also pointed to frivolity, an obsession with trivialities.
An obsession with entertainment, food, celebrity, luxury, while the actual foundations of the society rot. I mean, you see people obsessing over digital fashion in the metaverse, while their physical infrastructure, their bridges and roads are literally crumbling. It's the bread and circuses of Rome, just updated for the digital age.
And another symptom he noted was the influx of foreigners.
Yes, and Glubb notes this neutrally as a historical observation. In the age of decadence, the native population often loses its vigor. They stop doing the hard jobs. Critically, they stop reproducing.
Birth rates collapse.
They crater. So the empire has to import labor from the periphery just to keep the economic machine running. But this inevitably changes the social fabric. It dilutes the common narrative, the shared culture that held the empire it together in the first place.
And finally, the weakening of religion.
Which is then replaced by political fanaticism. The state becomes God, or an ideology becomes God. We see this with Elena. Her faith isn't in a transcendent power. Her faith is in the institution, in the policy, in the state.
There's one more piece to this puzzle. The Fisherian runaway concept applied to the dating market. This seems to accelerate the decadence.
It's the turbocharger on the engine of collapse. A Fisherian runaway in evolutionary biology is when a particular trait becomes exaggerated to the point of absurdity simply because it's sexually selected for.
The classic example is the peacock's tail.
The peacock's tail. It gets bigger, more colorful, more elaborate, because the peahens are attracted to it. It signals genetic fitness. But eventually it gets so big that the peacock can't fly properly and gets eaten by a tiger. The trait selected for beauty ends up leading to death.
So what's the modern human equivalent of the peacock's tail?
In 2026, it's the Instagram face. It's the performative lifestyle. It's the curated online persona.
We are selecting for beautiful ones.
We are. We are selecting for traits that look good on a screen: grooming, aesthetics, performative virtue signaling. We are not selecting for the traits that actually build a civilization.
Yeah.
We are not selecting for resilience, for heroic intelligence, for the ability to build, to protect, to suffer for a greater good. We are breeding a generation of human peacocks who are beautiful to look at, but are functionally useless in a real crisis.
And all of this together creates what you call the civilizational circuit breaker. It's a feedback loop of collapse.
It's a death spiral. You have
Right.
two sides moving in opposite directions, and each one's movement makes the others worse.
So, side A is Elena.
Side A, Elena, seeks stability through the hyper-agent state. She needs to mitigate the chaos of the free market and the increasing unreliability of men. So she votes for higher taxes, more regulation, more social programs to fund her safety net.
And side B is Arthur.
Side B, Arthur, sees this expansion of the state as a direct predatory attack. He sees his resources being siphoned off through taxation to fund a system that not only makes him obsolete, but is actively hostile to his interests. So what does he do?
He withdraws further.
He works less in the formal economy, he hides his assets in crypto, he refuses to participate, he goes galt.
And the more Arthur withdraws, the less tax revenue there is.
And the more precarious Elena feels, so she screams louder for more state support. The more the state expands to meet her needs, the more predatory it seems to Arthur, and the more he retreats.
They're locked in this reciprocal cycle of abandonment and demand.
They are. These are two distinct survival strategies that have become mutually exclusive. The success of one state expansion triggers the defense mechanism of the other male withdrawal. It's a perfect, self-reinforcing loop of social disintegration.
Which brings us back to the silence at the dinner party.
It is the silence of a society that has lost the ability to cooperate. The fundamental biological contract between male and female, the oldest and most important deal in the history of our species, has been broken.
So what we're watching is the biological endgame.
We're watching the transition from a society of producers and families to a society of dependents and isolates, and it circles right back to Calhoun's death squared.
The spirit dies first.
The spirit dies first. The desire to engage, to struggle, to build, to sacrifice for the future, that dies. You know, the beautiful ones in the mouse utopia, they didn't go out with a bang. They didn't have a civil war.
No, they just sat there.
They groomed themselves. They ate their fill. They slept. And they passively watched as the colony faded away into nothingness. The truly terrifying part of Universe 25 wasn't the violence in the middle stages. It was the quiet of the end.
The mice looked healthy. Their coats were shiny.
But they were the walking dead. They had nothing to live for.
The dinner party didn't end with a shouting match. It ended with a dry, cynical laugh and a silence.
The man laughed because he had already checked out of the system she was defending. And the woman fell silent because on some level she realized he wasn't arguing. He was just gone. He wasn't coming back.
That's the reality we're facing, isn't it? It's not the noise of the election that matters. It's the silence that follows. When all the Arthurs finally stop building and all the Elenas are left with a state that has run out of other people's money, the lights just go out.
The beautiful ones didn't scream. They just quietly let the future dissolve. The question for us in 2026 isn't about which political party can win the next election. The question is whether we can wake up from this comfortable utopia before the silence becomes permanent.